Shabbat Shalom. Yankee fans may well remember Game 1 of the 1998 World Series against the San Diego Padres. It was the bottom of the seventh and the score was tied 5-5. There were 2 outs, bases loaded, and Tino Martinez was at the plate for the Yankees. 2 balls and 2 strikes. The pitch from the lefty Langston came in right over the plate for what should have been a called 3rd strike, 3rd out, and end of the inning. The only problem being that the umpire did not call that pitch a strike but a ball, bringing the count to 3-2. You know how the story ends. With the next pitch, Martinez smacked a grand slam, pushing the Yankees up 9-5. They take the game 9-6, and San Diego never recovers, with the Yankees going on to sweep the World Series in 4 games. Last week, I watched a great feature from John Frankel entitled Man vs. Machine on HBO Real Sports. The 98 World Series is one of the most famous and egregious examples of when a missed call by a home plate umpire resulted in a dramatic reversal of fortune. Home plate umpires, by dint of being human, are necessarily imperfect. Although Major League Baseball claims a 97% accuracy rate for umpires in calling balls and strikes, third-party analysis of the data reveals an 88% accuracy rate, 1 in 8 pitches, approximately 30,000 pitches called incorrectly every year. More alarmingly, when analyzing the pitches at the corners within a few inches of the plate itself, the accuracy rate of the umpires drops precipitously, 31% incorrect, nearly 1 in every 3 pitches. Moreover, Frankel's reporting reveals a clear bias on the part of umpires in favor of the home team. For instance, Game 7 of the 2011 World Series between the Rangers and Cardinals, with a whopping 14 missed calls by the home plate umpire in favor of the home team, the Cardinals, who not surprisingly went on to win. The drama of Frankel's piece is not so much the imperfections of home plate umpires. That fact unto itself is neither new or newsworthy. The intrigue is that the technology presently exists whereby balls and strikes can be tracked with pinpoint accuracy by something called pitch FX, that square box over the home plate you see when you watch a game on television. Without much effort, Major League Baseball could, if it so chose, eliminate all the shortcomings of the imperfect human being behind home plate, replacing him with a machine. Not surprisingly, the sides of the debate are split. Traditionalists continue to tout the precision of umpires and the hallowed habits of the game. The other side is far less forgiving, as former outfielder Eric Burns asks, why do millions of people sitting at home get to know whether or not it was a ball or a strike, yet the poor dude behind home plate is the one who's left in the dark? At first blush, the debate is about tradition and progress. Every season brings with it new technological innovations that affect the field of play. The instant replay in football and baseball and elsewhere, the line call technology present in tennis matches, whereby the ultimate arbiter of whether a ball is in or out is not a line judge, but a computer, and likewise more recently in soccer, as goal line technology has been introduced into FIFA games. By such a telling, the question of Frankel's story is not one of kind, but degree. In other words, advances in technology already exist throughout the sporting world. It's only a matter of time before yet another advance, the elimination of the home plate empire, is made in America's pastime. And yet, on digging deeper, Frankel's piece raises a question more subtle, more profound, and of consequence far greater than the balancing act of tradition and change. At the core of the debate I think, lies a question regarding the human quest for perfection. There are those who would argue, not without merit, that the expectation should be perfection, that anything less is unacceptable, and that if by way of technology or otherwise a more perfect game can be played, then we should embrace that act as progress towards our desired goal. And there are others, I imagine, who would counsel that while the integrity of the game and the umpire must be maintained, the mistakes, the blunders, and even the blown calls, those too are part of the game. Human error is an implicit clause in the unwritten social contract of every spectator sport, part of the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. No different than losing the ball in the sun or the roar of the home team crowd, the imperfections of an umpire, while unfortunate, are part of the game. Sometimes you win, and sometimes you lose, and sometimes it rains. But the game is not the same game without it. One could even go so far as to say that not only are such imperfections part and parcel to the nature of the game itself, but it's only by way of these imperfections that the intrinsic beauty of the game comes into full view. Like a jeweler inspecting a precious stone, the last month of the Jewish year, culminating with our observance of Yom Kippur this past Wednesday, our focus has been on identifying the flaws and imperfections of our lives and then looking to remove them. The spiritual inventories we've taken, our declarations of guilt, the apologies given and accepted, hopefully, all with an eye to beginning the year with a clean slate. To a certain degree, the premise of the High Holidays is based on the possibility that though elusive, it's a perfect existence that remains our goal. So with the fast just a few hours behind us, this morning I want to offer a sermon from a different point of view, a counter-argument, maybe even a little heretically so, to the mood of the season. Maybe, just maybe, we need to redirect our spiritual search away from the quest for perfection. Perhaps I wonder if we're not missing out on the importance of imperfection, the very thing that maybe makes life worth living. In the coming days, when we'll read the story of creation, God's majesty, omnipotence, and perfection is unavoidable. Also unavoidable, we know, is the realization that whatever the divine intentions may have been, a perfect creation was not one of them. At the conclusion of every day of creation, God reflects on the fruits of the divine labor, the light, the vegetation, the animals, with the repeated refrain, Vayar Elohim ki tov, and God saw that it was good. As my late teacher, Dr. Tikva Frimer-Kensky, taught me, the choice of adjectives is significant. Creation was not excellent, not fabulous, not flawless, and definitely not perfect. There is actually a word in Hebrew for perfect, tam. We find it in this week's Torah reading to describe the one thing in the world that is perfect, God. Hatsur tamim poalo, the rock, God's deeds are perfect. Our world, however, was not created tam, it was created tov, good, a B+, or maybe an A-. God is perfect, creation is not. Yes, human beings are created in the divine image, but the promise of divine perfection is not and has never been ours. As Abraham Lincoln once reflected, God must love ordinary people. He made so many of them. God could have, and maybe even should have, created a perfect world, but for whatever reason beyond our reason, God chose not to. And from that very first bite of the fruit in the garden, and maybe even before, the design flaws of creation and of humanity have been evident for all to see. It's a fascinating thought to consider, that the foundation for all of biblical theology is the acknowledgement that a perfect God created an imperfect world. It's a realization, first and foremost, that prompts us to be partners with God in tending, tilling, and caring for creation. but it's also a realization that serves to liberate us from the oppressive insistence on perfection in our lives. Ours is an airbrush era, and we live in an airbrush neighborhood. We're inclined to hide all blemishes, physical, emotional, and otherwise. We share and speak only of the good. How are you? Fine. How's everything? Great. If we are on social media, we post carefully curated lives of our achievements, our prides, and our successes. We act as if life is perfect, despite the fact that we know it was never meant to be so. Sometimes life isn't great. Sometimes we are hurting. Sometimes sermons wander off track. And sometimes cantors' voices crack. But therein lies not the problem of being human, but the promise. It is the lean of the Leaning Tower of Pisa that makes it what it is. It is a well-placed mole, not just the well-shaped jawline wherein beauty can be found. Imperfections abound. They make us who we are, this world what it is. They are the flaws that constitute the beauty of life. In fact, we need look no further than the man of the last 48 hours, Nobel Prize winner Bob Dylan, to understand the power of imperfection. Dylan himself would have been the first to admit that he doesn't fit into a neat category of classically trained musicians. In his own words, quote, "The Beach Boys, Elton John, Billy Joel, they made perfect records. My records," Dylan explains, "were never perfect. The resonance of Dylan's voice has nothing to do with its vocal quality. The enduring value of his most precious melodies have nothing to do with their complexity or structural perfection. Even by his most devoted fans, Dylan's music is characterized as raw and sometimes artless. One shudders at the thought of Bob Dylan auto-tuning his voice, as is a common practice of contemporary vocalists. And yet it's exactly this gravelly and uncooked aspect of his craft that's contributed to the most enduring and original aspects of his art. Like the imperfect improvisations of jazz music, Dylan's music possesses what music critic Ted Gioia calls an aesthetic of imperfection. Contrary to a traditional aesthetic in search of polished masterpiece, it is an appreciation of the deeply human element in music, painting, and otherwise that makes true art perfect in all its imperfections. And what is true of Dylan's beauty and physical beauty, all the more so in life itself? The artist Salvador Dali once counseled, "Have no fear of perfection, you will never reach it." It is not only unrealistic to seek perfection of ourselves and of others, but it's also unhealthy. The most authentic path to finding the truth of who each of us are and who we seek to be will be found in embracing an aesthetic of imperfection, not by covering up mistakes, sorrows, and stumbles, but acknowledging them. Relationships of value can only be established and maintained by way of embracing those characteristics, imperfections, and otherwise, that mark a person's individuality. Of course, we can seek to improve. Of course, our relationships need to grow. But the most honest and true and vital moments in life are inevitably the times when we have tapped into, not avoided, our flawed existence. Those are the things, those are the moments that make us most human. Yes, we should always learn and improve, but it is progress we must seek, not perfection. As Leonard Cohen taught, there is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. The Maggid of Dubno told the story of a great king in possession of many beautiful things. But of all his possessions, his favorite was a beautiful diamond, as bright as it was beautiful and flawless. Each day the king would remove the diamond from his vault, gaze at its beauty, and return it for safekeeping. You can only imagine the horror when one day he removed it to discover a scratch in the perfect diamond. He sent for all of the diamond carvers in the land to see what could be done to return the diamond to its pristine state. One by one they came, each one shaking their heads. The scratch was too deep. Nothing could be done. Finally, with all hope lost, one last diamond cutter came before the king, requesting 10 days to work to fix a diamond. One day turned to two, two to three. The king grew more and more anxious, until finally on the 10th day, the diamond cutter appeared before the king. "Here it is, your majesty," he said, and opened the cloth so all could see the diamond. The king smiled broadly at what he saw. The scratch was still there, but it had become a stem to an exquisite flower now carved into the diamond. Unable to remove the flaw, it had been transformed into something more beautiful than the king ever imagined possible. The story is one that I've told more times than I can count. Is the king God and each one of us a flawed diamond? Or maybe we are meant to be the king and the scratch in the diamond represents the imperfections of the world around? I'm not so sure, and I'm not so sure it matters. What does matter is that no diamond, baseball or otherwise, is without flaw. Imperfections abound. It's part of life. So let's embrace that fact and embrace each other, making the most of this mostly good, but not altogether perfect world in which we have been blessed to live. Shabbat Shalom.